Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we're focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Drive On. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and today my guest is Thyron Heyward. Thyron is a Navy veteran who served as a corpsman during Desert Storm, and he has a powerful story of resilience and transformation to share with us. After struggling with PTSD for years following his military service, he embarked on a journey of healing and self-discovery, and today he holds a master's degree in clinical counseling, psychology, and runs a coaching and mentoring business dedicated to supporting veterans who may be facing similar challenges. Through his work, he aims to let veterans know that they are not alone and that help is available, which is very closely in line. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much straight in line with the mission of this show, is to let folks know that they are not alone, that whatever it is that they're going through, there have been other people who've went through it and they've come out on the other side stronger and more resilient for the struggles that they went through. And so hopefully we'll be able to share some of those stories today and get that message across to some of the listeners. So first, before we get into that, I want to welcome you to the show. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thanks, Scott. I'm really happy to be here, and this is a great cause. I'm glad you have this show.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing too. And I'm sure the listeners, once when we get a little bit more into it and we start having a little conversation, they'll hear a little bit about what you're doing, and they'll be interested in learning more about it and how that your services and the resources that you offer are going to be able to help them, or maybe even the folks that they know who might be struggling, just don't know where to turn. Because there are, I like to tell people, there are a lot of places out there, a lot of people doing amazing things for veterans. They're providing services, but if you don't know where to go, you don't know where to go. And that's kind of a problem. So I like to highlight resources, kind of like what you're doing, and share it with people and let them know that there are alternatives outside of the VA, even though the VA, they have a lot of services available. That's just the one that people tend to know about and they go to, and they feel frustrated when that doesn't quite meet their needs. And so, I like highlighting, other resources like this to share that with folks. So, before we get into what it is that you do, I like to kind of just take a step back and take a little journey down memory lane here and talk about your time in the Navy as a corpsman and your experiences during Desert Storm. What was that like for you, and what were your experiences like?
Well, I'd have to say, when I was in Desert Storm, I was 20 years old. So you got to imagine, 20, 21 years old, serving on the front lines as a corpsman. The only word I can think of is life changing. That there is nothing short of life changing. Right. When you're in the rear and you're practicing and you're running your drills is one thing, but when you're actually there and it happens, being able to try to find the words to describe the aftermath is not something that you're really prepared for. Sure. But I have to say, despite it all, the experience was one that I don't think I will ever forget. That's to say the least, but it opens your eyes to a lot of things, to see how the world really kind of functions. A little bit of politics, a whole lot of life, of how, we all were all kind of just, I think, really shocked. The fact that we were in war, being, like I said, 20 years old. And then, because most of us are joining the military just thinking we're here, college, or to get some type of training. But the military actually helped me grow up. The experience was one that I'm pretty sure I'll only be able to share with other veterans. that our population is elite enough to where we're able to have those encounters with others. Um, it's like we only that population can understand what the other person is coming on.
Yeah, I get that, and I hear that from a lot of other veterans too. It's like I don't know that anybody who hasn't been there, who hasn't, whether you've been in combat or not, you've been in the military, you've been trained to know what to sort of expect, whether you've actually experienced it yourself.
Right.
You have a better understanding from, the general population whose idea of combat might be, from the movie screen. That's pretty much the extent and how close they've actually come to combat themselves
Right.
is, a Saving Private Ryan, albeit as close as they can get it on a movie screen. That was pretty damn close.
Right.
That, but that's still light years away from what combat actually is, that because it's more than just the visual and the audio, where you're seeing the movie, you're hearing the sounds, it's the heart racing, it's the, if I don't do this to complete perfection, somebody might die,
Ex-
some will die, that type of feeling that you get inside, that gut wrenching feel. And how do you explain that to somebody? How do you explain that feeling? And that's, to your point, I think is damn near impossible.
Yeah. It's always challenging to try to explain. Like how you said, it's always challenging to try to explain to others,
Yeah.
um, what they see and how you live it and went through it. It's not what it's not what you see on TV. It is
No.
totally, it is, it's just two different capacities and how things really unfold.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So after, so you were young in Desert Storm, especially in a role as a corpsman where you're seeing the worst of the worst when, there are injuries. There's, people getting, uh, injured on the battlefield. That's who they call for. That's you. That you're the first line, of response for those people in order to provide life saving care, and they're calling for you. That's the name that they're yelling out. They're not yelling out for anybody else. They're yelling out for you.
Mhm.
And as a young person like you were, 20, 21 years old, that's a lot of weight to be on your shoulders. I remember me at 20 years old. I wasn't responsible the way, I am now, obviously. And, I mean, no, who was at 20 years old? And like you
Right.
said, you did a lot of growing up,
Right.
and it's kind of forced upon you. You kind of just get it thrown at you, and you're not changing your mindset, and you're not putting things into perspective at that point. People, like we said, get hurt, they die, things aren't great. But after getting out, you face challenges with that too, right? With the PTSD and things like that. Can you tell us about that journey to kind of find healing and overcoming some of those struggles that you experienced?
Um, wow. Yeah, that was a, serious, unexpected part of my journey. Of course, when I first got out, I think like a lot of us, I struggled first to find community. Um, that was my biggest one, trying to relate to simple everyday civilian activities. Going to have a transaction done and the person might respond to me in a way that, in the military is like, wait, what do you mean you can't do that? If you can't do that, then who can? It's just like, then who do I need to
Right.
speak to? Or it's just trying to get acclimated to civilian life, was really hard. Even more so because my father was a 26-year, Air Force veteran. And then my brother was in the military. My sister was in the military. So that's all I knew. So trying to adjust to civilian life was like, do these people know they don't have to operate like this? Did somebody not let them know that doesn't have to be done that way? So it was, it was, it was like, yeah, I had to relearn a whole lot of stuff, apparently.
Sure. Sure.
And, but I also carried a lot of, my military, um, lifestyle with me everywhere I go. people pretty much noticed it right off the back with yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'ams. Um, and the whole perfectionist thing, the way just everything is just, they noticed the whole, you have a set way of doing things. And is that the military? And it's like, some of it is, and some of it isn't. Some of it is what I learned from the military, how I incorporated that into my personality, my characteristics, because it works for me. It makes sense to
Mhm.
me. But it wasn't until later on, as I'm adjusting, that my PTSD symptoms manifested really heavily, to the point where I really did not know what was going on. Um, the only thing that I was aware of was the serious anger that I carried. Um, and Scott, you might not believe this, but I would get mad if I saw someone on the street and they like took a piece of trash and threw it on the ground and there's like a garbage can right there. I would go ballistic inside. And I was like, okay, something's not right. You
Yeah,
need to go get help.
I
And
believe it.
yeah, I did. And so when I first saw my first therapist, she said, Mr. Hayward, I could write a textbook on your classic PTSD. And I'm arguing with the therapist. I'm arguing with her, telling her, no, are you serious, lady? What's wrong with you? I don't have none of that stuff. Do I look like a, yeah. And it was a hard pill to swallow.
Sure.
Um, she even was like, you're not in the military anymore. So you're not a corpsman, which to me, I felt like she stole who I was. So it's like,
Mhm.
I don't have an identity. She's right. So I struggled a lot. Like I said, it was a dark time, and it was just slowly starting to remember, you know, or start to get out of it. Just slowly, really, really slowly. It is a lifelong process because it continues now, even still. Every day there's a little bit more, and the light gets lighter, but when you're in the darkness trying to explain it to other people, it was, like I said, it was one of the most challenging things that I'd ever dealt with, was trying to explain to people that I'm not feeling, trying to explain to them what I meant by that. When they're like, well, you're emotionally compromised right now. And it's like, well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it's like, you're not listening to what I'm trying to say, and
Right.
trying to find a way to relate that to other people was really difficult. When I started going to the veteran groups, and meeting with other vets, um, and listening to their stories, and listening to them explain their feelings, was one of the very first things to help me go, okay, I'm not alone. And, I'm not damaged. I'm not, uh, I'm not a used product of the government. All these different names that everybody always seems to kind of come up with and come out with that. I realized I was not any of those. And that it's just a day by day process. That was that was the biggest part.
Sure.
Um, and having, the therapist at the VA remind me. In fact, one of the therapists remind me, said, Mr. Hayward, he said, you're not only do you have OCD and PTSD, he said, you're a perfectionist. He said, that's a bad combination. He said, so he helped me just kind of really look at be realistic, get rid of the irrational thoughts, um, how to change my thinking process, how to go deeper within my own self to find the answers, and realize that I had the answers deep within my own self.
Yeah. That point of that's a bad combination, the PTSD, the OCD, and perfectionist, right? That I can see how that's a bad combination, right? Um, but you think about somebody who's a perfectionist. I think I probably have some tendencies of that too. I haven't had anyone formally say, "Hey, you're a perfectionist," but let's face it, I kind of am. Uh, but I could see that, and it's like, internally for me, it's like, well, why wouldn't you want to do things the best way possible?
Right.
Like, why would you want to half-ass something? Like, if
Exactly.
you're going to do it and do
Do
it
it.
right.
Right.
And to me, that just makes sense. And you see somebody else who's like, oh, I know there's a better way to do it, but this is the way I like to do it. Like, why? That doesn't make any sense. But going back, right, to your point is that that doesn't really serve you because you're not going to change that person, and getting mad at them and yelling at them or blowing up inside. That's not going to change anything with them. That's not going to solve the problem. That's just going to make you have heartburn or whatever your manifestation, whatever comes up, right? It's going to screw up your day, and that person's going to go off just fine, living in ignorant bliss that they are not doing things as well as they can be, and they don't really care. And I think if they don't care, like, I don't know, should should we have to care? I don't know.
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of the point that you're getting there. And that's a tough pill to swallow as a perfectionist, isn't
It's almost like saying, after I realizing, or now knowing and understanding that it is an unrealistic expectation, as it's almost to be a disease within itself. Um,
sure.
it I had to look at, like how you said, where all of it came from and why. Um, it's a practice of having to be okay with how other people do things, even though it doesn't make sense to you. There's
Hmm.
1,000 different ways to do the exact same thing on. It's just the different routes that we take. Um, so you're right. That was a real big one for me, is learning how to calm down and just say, you know what, my way isn't the best way because it was the way that served me best when I needed it. Now
Right.
it's like, I don't need it, or I don't have to be that way. But it's still so difficult, like how you said, because it's ingrained in us. Probably starting from boot camp when they tell us, shirts this way, socks that way. It's just certain things that to become ingrained in you because it feels natural. It feels natural.
Yeah. Honestly, my family and I were going on a family trip in a little bit here, and I sort of put together a packing list for the kids to I felt like I was back in the military putting together that packing list for going out on a training mission, or going out on a field op or whatever, and it's like, okay, you got to bring all these things. And I remember as a NCO going through my junior guys, going through their bags and everything, making sure they had all their socks and the t-shirts and whatever they needed to pack. And then
Right.
seeing that they took out like 4 pairs of socks and replaced it with a bag of chips or something. And it's like, what the hell are you doing? Right. That kind of stuff. And it's like that's the kind of perfection. I'm like, okay, there's a reason that I put this list together.
Right.
We're going for X number of days, and I want you to have clean underwear all those days. That's like a thing that, sorry if I might seem like a perfectionist, but I just want that to happen. So I'm gonna make sure we're gonna check that box that
Right.
those things are in there. And once when everything goes in the bag, it gets zipped up and it gets put away, and you don't see that until we get there. Because I don't want
Right.
you screwing with it. I don't want to find a bag of chips in place where your socks were. I don't want to find any of that. Right. I I don't know, maybe I have PTSD from all my guys who were pack stupid shit in their bags. But there's a reason, and again, it served a purpose,
Right.
and you can it's a tool in your toolbox
Right.
that you can pull out when you need it. When there are things that matter that need to be perfect, just like as a corpsman, when you were treating somebody, you needed to do your job perfectly. Otherwise, something bad could happen to that person. Something still bad could happen to that person, even if you did everything perfectly, because you may have been there too late. You couldn't have gotten there in time or whatever, or the injury was too severe, whatever the case may be. But had you not done your absolute best to absolute perfection, uh, much worse things could happen. And that's just a tool that you needed at that point in time. Going forward, like, you don't need that tool in every circumstance. You know, going to the ATM, or going to the grocery store, or going to wherever. You don't need everything with military precision and perfection every single time. You kind of let some things slide, and if you know, the cashier's not as quick as you thought they should be or whatever. It's, you know what? That's okay. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, you since, I think I mentioned this in the intro, since completed a master's degree in clinical counseling psychology and established a coaching and mentoring business for veterans. Um, what inspired you to pursue this path after going through your own struggles? What inspired you to go out and try to help others?
I honestly think it was because when I was going through all of everything, after looking back and reflecting, um, I realized that, like I said, being that we are a unique community, veterans, um, it just kind of like the universe showed me all at once. You're not the only person to go through this. And it broke my heart when I went through it. And just the thought of another veteran going through this, just that emptiness, that aloneness, the darkness of being alone after people's telling you, that being a part of this community is great. You get all these benefits, and you get this, you get that. And people have these ideas of how things are for you as a veteran and while you're military. But I don't ever remember anyone ever sharing with them the dark side of the military, i.e. just, Vietnam veterans and World War II veterans, shell shock, so on and so forth. But do they really know? None of them really know unless they've gone through it. And so on my darkest days, crying out for help, it's like, I understand that there's a part of our trials we have to go through. It's like there's a little spot we go through on our own to get to where we need to be. But even when we're on our own, we're still not alone.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was alone. And I don't, I don't think anyone should ever feel like that. I don't think anyone should. So that's
No,
what inspired me the most was to create an organization where people think no one else is ever going to understand this or nobody can help me. No, that's not true. I've been through so many things. Everyone keeps saying you need to write a book. I'm like, well, when I get the chance to sit down and put those thoughts together, I may, but the reality of it, once again, it's so hard for me that no one should have to go through this after going through what we've already been through, because we're still dealing with day-to-day things that people don't understand. It could push a person or it could trigger something and make them go one way or the other. And
yeah.
every day I am so grateful that I know that I've already been there, all the way down to the bottom, homeless, everything. No money, not knowing where my next meal is coming from, no place to live, sleeping in cars. I've done the homeless, done everything. So I've gone from the bottom all the way to where I'm at now. So I kind of feel like the universe does not give you the ideas and the feelings and the gifts that it gives to you to not do anything with. Now, I was very good at being a corpsman, but I know I could be better as a counselor or peer for someone who's gone through or has some issues that caused to them through the military. And it's like, I've lived the military most of my life. Even though I'm out, it's still my life.
Yeah.
That's not something that I can, even though it's a past life, it's not something that I can. So I know that other vets from other eras, what we're going through here now, even though we're the generation that we're in as far as military, it's still, stuff that's carried from those other military eras. That's why I said being in this population, being in an elite population, you get to carry all of it. So we're carrying past military traumas from other veterans from way back when. You know what I'm saying? When we got into
Mhm.
the bloodline, that's what we became a part of. So we're not just dealing with what I'm dealing with from the post, from the Gulf War. I'm also dealing with stuff from Vietnam. I'm also dealing with stuff from the First War. I'm dealing with stuff from when we first started having combat. That's what we're all dealing with. It's not just the now. We're dealing with the past as well. So, so there is a way. Once I, like I said, once I understood that, it's like, okay, everyone needs to be able to understand that we're not just dealing with what we have now. We're dealing with lots, and some of us don't really know how to handle that. Some
Right.
of us, it takes us a lot longer, and some of us just need somebody to say, "Hey, this is what's going on."
Yeah. And I never really thought of it the way you just described it as kind of like a bloodline
Yeah.
from generations going back and back. But if you think about it, anybody who's ever served in any capacity in the military, and not just U.S. military, any military throughout time,
Any
they
military.
learn from they learn from somebody, and that
Yeah.
person has had experience in the military at some point. So they're
Yeah.
carrying those lessons that they learned from previous generation to the next
Exactly.
generation, next, all the way on through current day soldiers who are, or Marines, airmen, whoever are in training right now.
Yep.
They're learning from someone who learned from somebody else, who learned from somebody else, and all the way back. And those people, they all started their journey somewhere. And so, yeah, we have roots going back to, the early, colonial days where there's, muskets and they stood on a line, and I don't know, those guys had
Oh,
balls of
yeah.
steel to do stuff like that, but,
Hey,
like our roots go back that far and even further because those people learned from, the even earlier in European and other areas, they learned from other people, and that's where those lessons came from. And so, like, that bloodline runs pretty deep.
yes.
And that's an interesting way to look at it. Um, but yeah, using your journey, your struggles to let people know that they're not alone, I think is super important. That's, part of what we try to do on this show is share stories like yours. Like, hey, this guy's been here. He's done this. He's experienced all these things. Like you mentioned, there's homelessness. There's people who have had, trouble landing jobs or just coping and dealing with civilian life.
Mm.
And there's reasons that these things happen. And there have been people just like that bloodline that you talked about. There have been people who've been there, they've done that, and they've experienced it, and they've learned how not to deal with these things, in some cases. And I think that's the important thing is that we trial and error, we figure things out. But in some cases, we don't need to just figure it out. We
Mhm.
can we can talk to other people who've been there, who have figured it out, and
Mhm.
we can talk to them and say, "Hey, what did you do? What worked for you? Maybe that thing that worked for you is going to work just fine for me. Maybe it won't, but maybe I talked to somebody else and they have that other thing." And I know for myself, going through my own journey, when I came home from Afghanistan and I had my own troubles that I was going through, and I hit that point where I was like, I need help because I
Mhm.
I don't like this person that I'm looking at in the mirror.
Yes.
And I picked up the phone and I made an appointment. And that was the scariest thing I could have done.
Mm.
Is picking up just a phone call. Like, think of how many phone calls you've made throughout your life. Everything from ordering takeout to calling your mom to, to whatever. You've made phone calls before. It's not a hard thing. That phone call was probably one of the hardest phone calls I've ever had to make. But as soon as I hung up the phone, I said to myself, "Hey, I'm not alone on this.
Mhm.
Somebody else is going to help me with this. They're not going to pick up the burden and carry it for me. They're going to show me how to carry it."
Right.
And that's what it did for me,
Right.
and that's how it helped me. And it was, it was. I'm not going to lie, it was scary to do. And I first walked in that very first meeting, and I remember thinking to myself, "What am I getting myself into?
Yeah.
What's on the other side of this door?" When I walk in, is it a padded room with a straitjacket? I don't know what I'm walking into. I have no idea, but
Right.
I know I need something. So
Right.
let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Right. And that's kind of my journey into this. And there was no padded room. There's no straitjackets. It was just another vet who was on the other side of that door who I was able to talk to, and he got it. He understood what I was going through, So
Yeah,
Um,
it was like how you said, you didn't know what was on the other side, but you knew that staying where you were was not,
yeah,
you weren't going to get anywhere. You knew that staying where you were would literally bring you down.
yeah,
In many words, I mean, you weren't living. You were just exist. You're just there. And when I first told the therapist, I said, I need to get better. He said, you're strange because most people don't want to seek out how to do better. I said, this isn't living. This isn't an existence. I said,
right.
I'm just here. I don't feel, I think, I don't know what's on the other side, but I know that I can no longer do this.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. And we've all gone through experiences where we didn't know what that experience was going to be like. We've
Yeah.
all raised our hand and sworn an oath, and then we got shipped off to boot camp, and we didn't know what it was going to be like when we got there.
Nope.
We knew it was going to change us. And a lot
Right.
of times people have been on this show and they said, "Hey, I was in a rough spot in life. I had nothing going for me. I had no career prospects. College was not a thing for me. I just didn't know what to do. And I knew I couldn't stay here," is
Mhm.
what they said. And they decided to enlist in, whichever branch they chose to get into. And that was that scary step to, like, I'm just gonna go do this, and I don't know what's on the other side, but
Mhm.
once when I get there, I'll I guess I'll figure it out, and I'll change for the better or for the worse, but I don't know, but I know there's gonna be some sort of change that's necessary. And they went in and they got the change that they needed, the change of, location, geographic location, change of people, change of
Mhm.
scenery, change of whatever it was that they were needing, and there's growth that came out of that, and
Yeah.
and I think that's what we're getting at here is there's growth coming from some of this change, even though it might be a little bit scary, but so what? Suck it up. You've seen scarier. Trust me.
This is true.
So so in your work with veterans, what are some of the common challenges or issues that you see, particularly with those who might be dealing with PTSD or other, maybe combat related type things where they're coming back and they have a bunch of issues. What are some of those more common things that you see?
Honestly, Scott, I'd have to say when I talk with other vets, um, I'd have to say it's almost a lack of confidence in their own self to be able to get through.
Mm,
Like I
interesting.
were just saying, not being able to see. Um, we are as humans, we're funny beings. We've gotten used to things that if it's tangible, we can work with. But if you can't see it, man, and if it's manifest as it's manifesting, then it's easy to just kind of get you off track of what it is that you need to do. And totally being guilty of that. Excuse me. I would definitely say the confidence to know that the work that they're putting in, it is going to make sense. That is going to, have a some legitimate something that they can see and feel. Growth is not something that happens overnight. We didn't get this way overnight. Like you said, when we joined the military, we basically signed a blank check with our names on it. It's just, okay, do what you want to do with this. And they did. But
Yeah.
what they don't tell you, or the disclaimer that if you have to, as they say, read the fine print, um, it's like saying, okay, when we're done with you, you know, you, you kind of go do what you need to do. And that's how a lot of us feel. We feel like we're left behind. We need to get caught up. A lot of us feel like the time is against us. We've lost a lot of time. Um, the inability to truly trust others. Um, Struggling once again, trying to find community is like one of the more bigger ones. Because we share that camaraderie with each other when we're in. We have a different outlook as far as civilians and that kind of thing. That when we get out, it's like one of the loudest silences I think I've ever heard is when I signed it and got that DD 214, and it's like they close the door and you're done.
Yeah.
So helping, like I said, helping them find that confidence that, you know, you can heal, you can do this. You just to take that confidence and take that first step. Like you said, making that phone call. I was literally forced to, because I knew, like I said, something was wrong, and I needed to make it right. But I was scared and I was nervous and I did not know. It's that unknown that gets us. So working with veterans that have no idea, I'm able to see where they are. I'm able to see where they can be and explain it to them. I see you as just, I see you powerful. I see you back in your own rights, doing your own thing. Just trying to help them get through that mental block so they could see it.
Yeah, and I like how you put that because there's very tangible things that we can work with really well.
Yes.
Things that we can see, touch, feel, taste. You know, we can deal with that stuff because those are like real things, even if they're somewhat unknown. Like you're about
Mhm.
to kick in a door and you don't know what's on the other side of that door. You don't
Right.
know if there's a guy with a rifle or a bomb or you don't know what's on the other side of that door, but you got a general idea.
Right.
There's either going to be something there and you're going to need to react and you're prepared for that, or there's going to be nothing there and you just, broke a door for no reason, But, that you kind of can deal with even those kind of unknowns, and they're a little bit less scary
Mhm.
than where do I fit in the world? Like
Yeah.
that's a pretty
Yes.
broad, uh,
Yes.
I don't know, you can't touch that, you can't taste it, you can't, see it really. But maybe you can see it. It's just maybe you need somebody else to help paint that picture for you.
Exactly.
Like weirdest thing is like if you read a book, you're looking at black and white, on a piece of paper, and yet the image that goes in your head is vivid, it's full of color. You can see that person that the author is writing about. You can see the house, the kitchen, or whatever it is of the room that they're describing. You can see that with the different color, like the wallpaper might be blue and it might have white countertops, and you're starting to build this picture in your head now as I'm saying these things. You're building this stuff. But the same thing, like in your life, maybe you don't see where you're fitting in the world.
Um,
And if you have somebody who's saying, "Hey, this is who you are. You're this powerful person," like you were saying, who has these qualities, and you can fit in these locations and doing these things. This is where that's when you start to maybe build that picture in your mind. And now, okay, now we got something a little more tangible that we can work with.
mhm.
Um, but but that lack of confidence, like you said, you don't have confidence in yourself. Well, then you're certainly not going to think of yourself as powerful if you're lacking confidence. You're not going to find yourself fitting in any particular group of people, especially with other veterans who you look at as kind of like the alpha elite, tough guy kind of thing
Yeah.
like that.
Those are the
You're
ones
not.
you're trying to emulate.
Yeah, exactly, and you are that,
Yes.
that's you,
Already are.
even if you don't feel it inside of you, you are that, you are those people. You have somebody else who is kinda on the outside looking in, you put that uniform on, they're looking at you like, "Holy crap, this is somebody," right? This is someone's got their stuff together, and they're I remember you, so you were in Desert Storm, and I'm a little bit younger than you are, so I was not in Desert Storm. But I remember when I was a kid, we grew up a very patriotic family. We grew up supporting the military, and basically anyone putting on a uniform who would risk their lives, EMS, firefighters, police, military, everybody, like those were the people we looked up to. It wasn't like the athletes and movie stars and stuff like that. It was those people, right? And I remember uh, there was an Air Force base near us, and there was a flight of returning troops coming back from Desert Storm, and I was 8, 9, 10 years old, somewhere around there at the time, and we went up to this Air Force base, and we watched them coming in, and I swear to God, it could have been Michael Jordan walking down that thing, and I would, like to somebody else, it wouldn't have mattered. It was like that was me looking at those people, and so for those people who are sitting out there like, oh, who am I? What am I? Well, to that little kid, you were freaking Superman is who
Yes.
you were.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
who you were. and that's who you are, for that's what you need to kind of instill in yourself is that you still got that.
Oh yeah.
Just because you took the uniform off doesn't mean that you're now all of a sudden, less of a person.
That's how I still look
You're
at my
still there.
dad. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, my dad's been retired for forever, but I look at old pictures of him in his uniform, and he was taking his uniform off more or less when I was putting mine on.
Yeah.
Even though it was different uniforms, it was still, I felt my dad's pride. I felt like I'm representing myself. I'm representing my dad. I'm representing my family. I'm representing my country. I'm an ambassador. So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, and that's great too. That you still see that in your father. Like, and my younger brother, he joined before I did, and he went from being, the kid I used to, roughhouse and beat up and, all that kind of stuff as we were kids to he put the uniform and I was like, now you're Superman. Like you're
Right.
untouchable to
Right.
me. And it was like a complete night and day change. I was super proud of him for that. And he was like now all of a sudden this bigger than life person, even though he was the same person I grew up with all our lives, he just became this bigger than life kind of thing. And for the listeners out there, you got that in you too. You may not realize it, but you got
No.
that in you.
Yes.
Somebody else is looking at you like, "Hey, man, I'm proud of you
Yes.
for what you're doing." Um, so, what are some of the strategies or techniques that you use in your coaching uh, to help veterans build this resilience and confidence in themselves and navigate this transition that they're going through?
Um, well, I'm part nerd, so I do a lot of reading. Um, and what I did basically was, uh, being that I know that we're, all spiritual beings. One of the therapists asked me pretty much the same question. He said, so Miss Hayward, you have a bachelor's degree in policy analysis. He said, and you have severe PTSD and depression. I said, can I ask, how did you do that? And I said, my spiritual growth, my spiritual path is what helped me more than anything in all of my um, so leaning into that, and then what resources the VA had as far as, uh, you know, doing mindfulness practices and things that we weren't ever really used to. Um, Mindfulness, meditation. I discovered acupuncture. I discovered, pretty much anything that resounded with me and it felt like it was going to help benefit me, help me change my thinking. And what I realized is I need to get to the root cause. I like to treat things at the root. Um, so learning more about PTSD, I just dove into it. What is PTSD? How does it work? What does it do to the brain? I need to know all of this. This is where the perfection works and it kicks in because I need to know. I was like, I need to know how, and in every angle and every way I can combat this, or deal with. Learning first and foremost to change my words, how I spoke. Everything's connected. The physical illness that I was feeling also came from the mentalness of that, my mentalness. Those things, learning all of this. Like I said, I had to retrain and learn a whole bunch of new stuff.
Mhm.
The resources through the VA were good, but I just kept pushing myself to go even further. I was like, I know there's more. There's more. There's got to be more. So those things that you hear your friends tell you to do, try yoga. Yes, it works. Just try a different form. It's like I said, you have to keep searching until you find the one that works or resonates with you.
Yeah.
Okay. People complain about meditation. There's so many different forms of meditation, Scott. Music, painting, just writing, journaling. It's, you can lose yourself in all of that. And it's okay to do so. We
Mhm.
were always taught to not dream. We were taught these things to not do when it's actually the opposite. We should be dreaming bigger. We should be writing more. We should be listening. It's all the things that they're small, but they're powerful. They're small, but they're powerful. If you're able to listen to the still small voice, if you hear that little voice in your head, sometimes it's almost just a whisper telling you to do something. I had to engage that whisper. So that
Mhm.
whisper was saying, go take pictures. I was in that spot where I did like doing any of the things that I like doing. And that small voice would say, go do it. It'd say, go try acupuncture, go try meditation, go try yoga, try a different form of yoga. You know, ask your friend this, ask your friend that. And when I ask something, it's not just to ask. It's like, I'm going to use what I ask. So, so yeah, just being open-minded and knowing that if I don't make this change, then no one else is. It's not going to happen without. I have to do it. I am the catalyst. I am responsible.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea that if you do the same things that you've always done, you're going to get the same things that you've always gotten. If you're not happy with the things that you've always gotten, then you need to do something different.
Exactly.
Because you're just not going to see that kind of change by just continuing to, do the same thing over and over again. You know, and yeah, try different things. And I know some of the things that you mentioned. There's probably some people out there. I was one of these people who 10 years ago, if someone mentioned, "Hey, go, try acupuncture or meditation," and I'd be thinking, "Well, like, would I look like some kinda hippie dude?" Like, what that type of thing, like, that was my reaction, and it's like, I've I've tried these things, and I've got and some of them have worked for me, and some of them that's to different degrees, and some of
Right.
them will work for you, and some of them won't. But because it may not work, to me, is not a reason not to try it.
Exactly.
You know, because it may work too.
It would.
And it's like, that unknown. It's either you could think of it as either something that can work or as something that can't work until
Mhm.
you've tried it and find out which one it is. And
Yep.
so right now they're equal outcomes. But I can guarantee you right now, it will not work for you if you don't even give it a chance.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you gotta at least give it a shot.
Yes.
And, you know, some people, acupuncture, you mentioned that, and I'm only bringing this up because you mentioned it, but, um, they mention acupuncture, like, "Oh, I don't like needles. I don't like" those things are so damn small. Like, you barely even notice that they're touching. I described it. My son asked me, like, "What does acupuncture feel like?" Because they're putting all these little needles in you. And I'm like, "It's like if you took, like, a little tip of a pencil or a pen or something like that and just, like, tapped your skin." Like, that's kinda what it feels like.
Mhm.
It On occasion, yes, they might hit a spot that's a little bit more sensitive,
Right.
and it maybe has, like, a little poke for, what, 5 seconds or something like that, that you feel it, and then it kinda goes away. I've actually fallen asleep with
Yeah.
all the needles in me. Like, so it's not like I'm sitting there,
That's what
like,
they
breathing in
encourage
pain.
you to do. And you know what I'm saying? It's like hey, whenever I leave, my practitioner puts in the needles, he goes, okay, have a nice rest. I'll see you in a little while. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they turn the lights off, and there's this calming
that,
music and, like,
that's,
whatever,
and that's a perfect time for you to transform. That's the whole purpose. It's a transformation. But
right.
if you're not, but you're right. If you're not in your headspace where you're like, if you're just, you know, negative and all of that, then of course that's what you're gonna get. But
Yeah,
if you're going in there like how you said with, I have to find something because what I'm doing now isn't working. So I have to try this to at least see if it is going to manifest something. If it doesn't, then I know I need to move on to something else. But I have to try this. So you can cross it off the list.
right.
Like my
Yeah,
son would need acupuncture. He walked out of the room, looked at me like, he's like, Dad, what did he do to you? I said, see, he can see that. He can see the results. I'm
right.
just like, wow. So,
Yeah,
and I could feel it. So my dad hadn't seen me in years. And I hadn't seen him. I saw him after 2 years of acupuncture. My dad was like, what did you do? Those were the first words out of his mouth, Scott. What did you do? And like I said, I explained, I said, Dad, it's the thinking. I said, I realized my thinking, as they used to say in school, I has thinking. You know, I had to realize I had the power to change my thoughts. Nobody ever told me that before. Nobody ever said, you can change your mind.
Mhm.
So I had to learn that. I had to learn I could change my mind. Was all me. I was the one making this happen. It's
Sure.
me and the universe. Help, guide, show me what I need. But I knew at that point, it's like, wait, if I can change this, then I don't need to live like that. And I'm not going to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of comfort in being where you're at, but when you recognize that where you're at is not serving you, it's not serving the people around you, it's hurting your relationships, it's
Mhm.
hurting your career, it's hurting, the things that you care about,
Yes.
around you.
Yes.
When you see all of that negativity, all those negative influences, there's kind of one thing in common in all of those situations, and that's you.
And that's
And
you.
maybe
Yes.
there's something that see all of that negative
Mhm.
relationships were good. You
Yes.
know, you don't, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I personally wouldn't go and get married to somebody who I absolutely hated. And I was ready to, rip their face off or something like that. Like that to me just doesn't seem
Right.
like that's so at one point it was probably working for you guys. Like that, whatever that relationship was. And something changed. And
Mhm.
if that's you that
Mhm.
changed and there's a thing that you can identify that needs some help and work and improvement on, well, go and freaking fix it and get
Yes.
back to where you were. Fix
Yeah.
that relationship, fix that career, fix that attitude and mindset that you have, um, and try all of the things. Worst case scenario is you've tried something and it doesn't work for you.
And it doesn't
At
work.
least you've learned, like you said, you've learned that thing doesn't work for you. Check the box, cross it off, move on. Give it a shot though. Give it a fair shot. Acupuncture doesn't work all the time after the very first session. So it's kind of like um, like a medication. You might need to ramp up a little bit and do
Yes.
3 or 4 sessions or something like that before you start feeling some sort of benefits from it. Um,
Right.
but but it's I don't know, some people might be sooner. Some people might be a little bit later, but give it a fair shot. And if it doesn't work for you, cool. Don't waste any more time on it. Move on, cross it off, and find something else. But
Right.
do something.
Yes.
It's just like in the military, if you as a corpsman were being called like, hey, somebody got shot or something, and you just kind of froze and you sat there like, well, that person wasn't getting any help. Like you had to go and figure out what to do. And if you got to that person, you saw what was going on, you you just like stared at your kit with all your supplies and everything, and you're like, I don't know what to do, and you just stared at it. Well, that person's not getting any better. You got to do something, anything. Do something. Rub dirt in it for crying out loud. Do something to to like at move in the right direction. Like
Right.
eventually you'll figure out that one wasn't the right idea, but
Right.
then you'll clean it out and you'll do what is necessary. But do something,
Yes.
and then eventually you'll find the thing that works, and it's like, okay, that's working, so I'm going to do more of that.
Yeah.
And trust me, it's not like this is going to be like a you know 10-20 year journey that you're going
Mhm.
through to find these things. Like there's so many things out there. If you're struggling to find out the things, I'm sure you've got a list of resources that people can try, right? I'm sure you can refer people to, you know, things like acupuncture or things like along those lines. The VA has a ton of
Yes. Yes.
alternatives that you can go through.
Yes.
Um, most of the stuff that I've tried has been through the VA, even if it
Yes.
wasn't directly from a VA provider. They've referred me out to the community
Right.
for acupuncture. It was 3 miles down the road from from my house, so it's not like it was a huge time commitment for me to get there and do anything. Like I'm able to cut out for lunch if I wanted to and go do that. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
come
Right.
back, almost like a different person
Yeah.
afterwards.
Exactly.
Like a little drool coming down my face because I fell asleep or whatever. Well, the point is try something, right?
Yes. Yes. Do something. Yes.
Yeah. So I think you and I probably share a very similar mission in terms of raising awareness for mental health support and
Mhm.
the issues that are plaguing the veteran community, the military in general. Um, in your experience, what are some of the most effective ways that you found to raising awareness about the mental health issues and help combat the stigma around seeking help or things like that, especially with regards to veterans? I know a lot of us are very very stubborn minded and we don't want to ask for help, and I'm tough, I can handle this, I don't need somebody telling me to go do yoga or acupuncture or meditate or any of that kind of stuff. What are some of the ways that you found to kind of break through those barriers?
One of the biggest ones, you're right, because there is a lot of stigma around once you've been in the military, you're tough. And there's nothing that, that you can't do. And of course, these movies that people are watching nowadays, it's, this whole chismo personification of you're tough and you don't need anybody and, you
Sure.
don't cry. And I say hogwash. Sorry. I think that was, you know, an old idea for an old time, pioneers going across the frontier, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and facing this and facing that because they had to. Well, there are a lot of things that we're facing, but we don't have to deal with them in the same way. Um,
Sure.
what is it we're told when we're kids, especially being boys, you don't cry, you know?
Yeah.
I was different. When my son cried, had a problem and he cried, I told him to cry. I corrected it. I was like, no, it's okay to cry and let him know it was okay. And he stopped when he needed to. It's really, this is still a difficult thing because that stereotype of, like I said, once again, a tough guy is it still prevails. Um, it's not realistic. That's how I look at it. Is I tell
Yeah.
people, that's not a realistic expectation of yourself. Um, because once again, not just the fact that we're human, but we're designed to go through certain things and to respond in a certain way. When we feel pain, we're supposed to express it and we're supposed to cry. When we feel whatever we feel, we're supposed to be able to express those freely. We, however, have been sold and told that we're not supposed to because of this, that, or the other, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and what I do is I tell them, I said, when I got to that one dark spot, I remember a dark day when I was sitting on the couch at a friend's house, uh, just short of being homeless. Actually, she had just found out I was homeless and was sitting on her couch. My sister and I spoke, and I told my sister, I said, I don't know what to do. And this is the first time, family, she was the only person I felt safe with. Explained it, just saying that and not being judged. And I said, I don't know what to do. I said, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I don't even know where to go or where I'm supposed to be. And at that moment, I hadn't cried. I remember specifically, I hadn't cried for over 20 years. And it's like it started and it would not stop. And it kept going. And she sat there on the phone with me until I stopped. And I mean, it was a while. And she sat there on the phone until I stopped. And she said, now, don't you feel better? And she was right. I did. And I had to ask myself, why didn't I do this before? Because I was so, once again, worried about what other people would say, what other people would think. I've saved lives. I've ran across foreign country, topography to save people, to do my job. And yet I still felt it was not okay for me to be human and cry because I was having a moment. So something needed to change. So once I started, we give other people compassion when we're helping them and when we're dealing with them, but we won't give it to ourselves.
Right.
And the worst critic that you can have in your life is your own self. You can beat yourself up better than anybody on the planet. I promise you can. We can all do that.
Yep.
So I had to learn how to reverse that and give myself the okay to cry, the okay to bleed, the okay to feel depressed, okay to feel angry, to let it be validated. And then it's like once you do all of that, get it all out of the way, you bottom out, think you can go. So once you get there, it's explaining to them that I try to let them know that what they're doing is a little unrealistic. I say, trying to be that tough person and hold all of this in, it's not good for you because it's going to manifest in some other way. So you have to be able to deal with it when you need to deal with it, not just push it down. But it's good old American way, just push it down and don't talk about it. No, that's not acceptable because we are making bigger strides now in mental health. And back in the day, we never really talked about mental health. It was all labels and stigma. Person was crazy. They just, they got carted off down to some family's house or something, and they just didn't talk about it. Or if it was something really serious, then you kind of had to walk on eggshells around that person. So that's because we didn't know. Now we know so much more than what we did before. And I think it is prevalent that we continue to. I met a physician who told me they knew nothing about PTSD. He said they had to actually sit down and learn from the Vietnam veterans what it was. They went beyond the shell shock. So they had to sit down with the Vietnam vets and get educated as to what it was and how things were fun before they could figure out how to treat. So they had to be educated on it. All I'm doing is when I talk to my guys and my ladies, is I let them know, whoever told you weren't supposed to cry, tell them come see me. Okay. And I got some words for them. As whoever told you all of this stuff that you are believing right now, please tell them to come and see me.
Sure.
Okay. Because I will use the science and the data to back it up. Okay. It's not about, a contest of strength. It's just knowing basic human stuff. We are fragile. We are very fragile. But somebody told us along the way that we were Superman. And we need our Superman moments. Don't get me wrong, we do. But we don't need them all the time. That's unrealistic to expect that any person, military or not, trauma is trauma. So it's unrealistic to expect anyone who's gone through some type of trauma to not be able to process that. Mm-hmm. And like you said, mental health and these times, everything is changing now. It is really changing, hopefully for the better, as we start to continue to understand and learn how traumatic instances affect us, especially if we don't address them. How the long-term cost of that is, it's not good. So I allow them, or who that person may be, to have that moment. But I also, like I said, I like to plant that seed and let them work with them. Okay. When the day you can't cry is the day you really need to sit down and have a talk, with like a spiritual leader or someone. So you could get in touch. You need to get in touch with you. You're not in touch with yourself. You have to be able to be honest and real with yourself before you can do anything else. So when they come to me like that, I do my best to soften them up and just change their thought process as to listening to how irrational that really sounds. And for most of them, it makes sense. And then it's, like I said, it's just a matter of peeling back what they've already been told, and they've taken it as true. Somebody said you weren't supposed to cry. Well, why? Because I'm a guy and guys are strong and we don't cry. If I poke you real hard and it hurts, are you going to cry? Or are you going to be a guy because somebody told you? You see what I'm saying?
Sure. No, I see what you're saying. And you brought up a point too, which I hope this point doesn't get lost on the listeners. but you were talking about how you know guys are tough, and we're picking on the guys here because let's just face it,
Yeah,
most
let's
is
get
guys,
on.
but there's women too, and women are tough, and
Yes.
I met some tougher women than me in
Yeah.
the military. No, like so I'm not discounting the women's service, and when we say guys, I'm using it as a generic term to
Exactly. Right.
all y'all kind of thing. Like
Right.
I'm trying to refer to everybody, but back in the day, there was these pioneers, right? And you mentioned this. They went across the country and they were exploring and settling different areas, and it was a tough life, right? But the very first people who went out and settled different areas, they maybe didn't bring all the supplies that they needed, right? And
Right.
right, and so they had a little tougher go than somebody else, and
Exactly.
maybe they didn't have a tent to sleep under, and they got wet and they got cold and maybe they got sick and they had a lot of problems going across the country, and maybe they came back and they explained, oh, I didn't make it all the way to my destination because I didn't have X, Y, and Z. They told those other people who were about to go off, and like, oh, well, maybe I got to go get that stuff too now. Let me go get that tent and get these other supplies, whatever it was, right? And now more people know. Okay,
Mhm.
I know I got to take all these things, and I got to take this on my journey to wherever it is that I'm going, and I'll have a little bit easier time. And along the way, they're going to figure out other things too. And now we don't have horses and buggies, and now we got planes, trains, and automobiles to take us wherever we go. And there was at one point, there was a point in time when nobody had driven a car across this country. And then
Exactly.
somebody did. And they're like, that's a heck of a lot easier than riding on a horse the whole way. So I'm going to do that instead.
Right.
And then somebody was like, hey, guess what? We got this cool thing called a train, and we're going to do that too. And we got a plane too. And we're going to fly across the country, and we'll beat your time, and we'll be there in no time. And so now that's what we do. It's like, if I want to go from where I'm at on the West Coast to the East Coast, first thing I'm thinking about is getting on a plane because I'll
Exactly.
be there in a few hours as
Exactly.
opposed to a few days driving in a car or, some other form of transportation. So, like that's, you learn over time and you take those tools and those resources from other people, and somebody else flew across the country before I did, but that's in that bloodline of people, right? And you were talking about the bloodline of the military, and I'm hoping that now the bloodline of the veterans, we're learning, hey, you don't got to go through this stuff alone. You don't have to live the next, however many 40, years of your life or whatever it is in misery and being angry and bitter and holding resentment and all this kind of stuff. There's a better way to do it, and we're figuring it out now. And guess what? Now we're like those pioneers who came back and were like, I forgot my tent, that kind of thing. We're like,
Right.
there's this thing that if I had this would have been so much easier. And so
Oh my.
now we're gonna go and we're gonna figure it out. And maybe I don't have all my supplies that I could have had, but it's gonna be a little bit easier. And
Right.
I'll let other people know, hey, if I had this instead, that would have made it that much easier. And then we'll continue to grow that way. But if you don't listen to the advice, like if one of those explorers was like, I don't need a tent, I'm good, I'm tough, I can handle it without it. Like, yeah, you're gonna be cold and you're gonna be wet and you're gonna be miserable and you're probably not gonna make it because you're gonna get sick. And if you ever played that Oregon Trail game, you're gonna die of dysentery or something. Like that's just gonna be what happens. Like I'm sorry, like
Right.
that's life. So listen to the advice of other people. And I think you're a great example here of what you've gone through and what you've helped other people with and how you're spreading this message. Like, can we just get out of our own way and
Yeah.
listen for
Yeah.
once? I think that's the point.
It is. Right. Yeah.
I'll get off my soapbox. I think you did a great job driving that point home, though. I think it's really good. I do want to take a quick break here for a segment, kind of switch things up a little bit. I know a
Okay.
lot of times these episodes that we do they're kind of tough, kind of heavy. Sometimes you do a little digging, and it kind of digs at that soul, who you are, that core of who you are, and everything. And sometimes we just need a good laugh.
Right.
And so whenever I have another veteran on the show, I like to do a segment called "Is It Service Connect?"
Okay.
And I like to think of it kind of as America's Funniest Home Videos, but like military edition. And so it's always laughing at the things that go wrong in the military and
Mhm.
how we can laugh at each other. We got thick enough skin, we can do that. So, so I'll pull up this video here so that you can see it as well. But I like to uh, do this with the veterans because it always gets a good laugh. For the listeners who can't see the video, I'll do my best to describe it. Sometimes these videos, they go by pretty quick. Looks like a short 10, 13-second video, whatever. So I'll do my best to describe it as it's going on. We'll see what happens here. It looks like we're on maybe a grenade range. Got a line of soldiers on the left of the screen. They're all kitted up, so it looks like they're prepared for whatever's about to come. And then we got somebody on the right. I can't quite tell how well. Doesn't even look like they have a helmet on. It looks like they're just standing there in uniform, kind of hunched over. We'll see what happens.
Oh shit.
Okay, looks like he's getting ready to toss a grenade. He's kind of peeking over the wall. The other soldiers are watching him. He throws it, and it doesn't quite clear the wall. Everybody is running, and then hitting the deck. So that probably did not go the way he was planning on it. Or any of them were planning on it to go. I'm hoping that was a, kind of like a training range where it was just a dud grenade. They didn't quite show the end of that video, so I'm not sure if there was no more video to be shown because everything got destroyed after that, or if that was a just a a dud and they turned off the video at that point. Gosh, I hope it was just a training scenario and it was one of those dummy grenades.
What it reminded me of being out on a grenade range, but we didn't all have to run at the
No, it's like usually it went that way, and that was
Right.
it was like you just waited for the
Everybody
boom
got
and
his
then you're good.
Well, the video, everybody started, exhaling. So it's like, I don't think it's supposed to go that way. So
No. So, well, I guess there's two scenarios. One, it was a live grenade and it didn't clear the wall, and two, it was a dummy grenade and it didn't clear the wall. If it was a live grenade, there's probably going to be some shrapnel injuries. Definitely the explosion. You're going to have some hearing issues.
right.
They were all pretty close when
Yeah.
when that guy threw that grenade over that wall. So I'm guessing if it was live, somebody's seriously hurt. If not, worse. God forbid. I hope not. But
Yeah.
there definitely would be some service connection going on with that. If it was just a training grenade, I don't know. I've had those things go off right at my feet, and it's a little loud, but they're
Right.
you'll be okay. You can walk those off. So there's no shrapnel for the listeners who aren't familiar with those. It's just like a blasting cap inside of a thing, and it doesn't actually explode. It just makes a popping noise. So you don't want to be holding them in your hand necessarily, but if they're on the ground next to you or something, it's not the end of the
Right.
world. So so hopefully it was the latter. Hopefully it was a training grenade and everybody walked away just fine and they just overreacted to that, or
Right.
they're just didn't know. Maybe it was I don't know what he's thrown over this wall. So let's better be safe than sorry. But they all seem to hit the deck when they got away. So I don't know. I guess there could be some, but hopefully there was none.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So anyways, thank you again for taking the time to join us. Where can people go to get in touch with you, find out more about the counseling and mentoring services that you offer?
Well, right now I just have my my email, which is revets24@gmail. And all they have to do is just, they want to chat or they have some time or questions or anything, just send me an email. And I'm pretty quick to respond. Of course, that whole perfectionist thing still kicks in at some things. So, I'm pretty quick to respond and, I anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Any type of question, any concerns. That's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. Especially like
Excellent.
it is small and elite. And I think that's a great thing to say for us. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll have that link to your email in the show notes for folks if they are interested in finding out more about what you do. They can reach out and get in touch with you, and they'll be able to get that information. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. in sharing. I mean, the message that you have, the conversation that we've had today, I think has been inspiring not only to me but also to the listeners. So thank you for taking the time to share it and for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure. So yes, I think what you're doing is amazing. Thanks, Scott.
Likewise. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.